right, so I wanted to talk a little bit about why it's important to create a disaster-aware culture on campus. A little bit about emergency management, a program that we teach in the Baker School, right? So we want to create a disaster-aware campus from the top to the bottom so that we're prepared to respond and recover to any disruptions we may have, and also to call on you all for interdisciplinary collaboration. And how do we accomplish that? Well, first you need to know what the heck emergency management is, right? So oftentimes when we hear this, we think of first responders. We think of police vehicles, fire engines, ambulances. So today I'm going to tell you a little bit about what emergency management is and is not. And so emergency management is a managerial function charged with creating the framework within which communities reduce vulnerability to hazards and cope with disasters. So that literally just means let's put some aces in our places so that we're best suited to carry on when we have a disruption to our normalcy. What do we do as emergency managers? It's the second word in our title, management. We're fundamentally managers that plan, organize, staff, direct, coordinate, report, and budgeting, because as you'll see later, budgeting makes the whole emergency management world go round. And so what it's not, kind of as I mentioned, when people hear the word, what it evokes, it's not policing. It's not fire, EMS. It's not homeland security. While those are important concepts to the disaster response phase, that's just a small portion of the disaster response phase. And we still have the mitigation, preparedness, and recovery phases. So kind of a history and evolution of emergency management, right? Noah was the first emergency manager. Had information about an impending disaster, only few listened, and many failed to prepare, right? Then we went on to the era of civil defense with some lone person sitting in a basement somewhere, and then we continued on as we grew, going too fast as well. And so 60 years ago, we didn't even exist as a profession or a discipline. Not until 1979, with the National Governor's Report, was it created. And I like to joke, in 1979, FEMA was created. Well, all things EM that are great were in 1979, including me. So phases of emergency management, so that you know, we have mitigation, which kind of aligns with prevention, preparedness, with early warnings, response, search and rescue, and recovery. So those are the four areas that we look at and that we have to manage for our communities or our institutions and organizations. I know this is small, but I wanted to put this up there since it's going to be online. There is literally something for everyone to collaborate and coordinate with in interdisciplinary research or real-world service projects. As you can see, public safety, energy, logistics, right? Logistics is huge. Some of the support and access, managing volunteers, our tribal relations, working with underserved communities, public affairs, financial management, right? Disaster dollars, it really matters. And now I got ahead of schedule. Or it broke. Okay, so what is a professional emergency manager, right? So the professional emergency manager is basically someone that coordinates and collaboratively integrates all relevant stakeholders. In other words, you're kind of the one that's bringing everybody to the party, right? Like the organizers tonight brought us all here. That's what we're doing. We're taking stock of our resources and our funds. Someone who can see the bigger picture, 30,000-foot view, and providing leadership, right? So we need somebody that's strategic, that understands planning, and that understands management, and can help accomplish each of these various bullets on the screen. So simply put, this is the money part, right? On my famous quote, your job as an emergency manager is to convince people to spend money they don't believe they have on something they believe will never happen. And that holds true, right? Because that's what we're always in a budget crunch. So what comes first? Filling the potholes that get you unelected or preparing for a flood that's coming, right? So now that we've talked briefly about what emergency management is, EM 101, what is a disaster, right? Most of us tend to think of Hurricane Katrina, September 11th, and that's what we envision when we hear those words. And so the question is, and early literature shows, is there a difference between an emergency, a disaster, and a catastrophe? So I'll tell you a little bit about that today so that you can kind of have an understanding of what that looks like and kind of what each one means. And so for an emergency, these are gonna be the things that we see every day, right? Anybody that drives on a highway in our lovely area knows that there's always vehicle collisions, right? But these are the things that are local, they're routine, predictable, they're easily managed, right? A car crash, we respond, we make sure lives are safe, and then we remove the debris and we continue on with our business. So what's the difference between a disaster? Well, community disruption. Oftentimes it exceeds the local capacity to meet the unmet needs and challenges that arise as the disruption occurs. Tornadoes, floods, earthquakes, right? We've all seen those. We've all had our share of them. We've had significant flooding events in this region recently in the last couple of years. So now let's go to catastrophe, right? These are huge. Aid is slow to come. Oftentimes you're on your own for a couple of weeks before any help comes. We think 9/11 or Katrina were bad, and they were, but we lost approximately 4,000 people on each of those. The Indian Ocean tsunami, they lost over 250,000 people in that incident. So we need to think about, what does all of that mean? They're becoming more frequent disasters, right? The impact and severity are also increasing. Emergency managers are needed, and need for interdisciplinary research also needs. That includes engineers, our PIOs, and everyone involved, whole community. So, quote here to end: by failing to plan, you are planning to fail. Thank you very much.